Here we are again. We're going into our 5th case study, and it's a little different. It is, like all of our case studies, an organization that wants to innovate. And like our prior case study, Vitality, it's an existing organization, but it wants to change itself in some do good, do well kind of way. Here's the wrinkle. This organization is nonprofit, unlike the other ones that we looked at. And it is a health delivery organization, very famous. It's called the Hospital for Special Surgery. It's based in New York City. It's very old, and they have continually innovated in ways of dealing with joint diseases. Most of their work involves orthopedic surgery on the shoulders, on knees, on hips, on other parts of the body where bones are jointed. Orthopedic surgeons are typically really big people because they're moving all these big bones around. But that's not all they do. The Hospital for Special Surgery has developed protocols for how they do the surgery. You might think, big deal, they've developed protocols, but they're working with independent surgeons who are not employed by the hospital. And surgeons have a lot of points of view about how they perform surgery. Ever carve a turkey? Ever watch somebody else carve a turkey? You know how many different theories there are about how to best carve a turkey? So now imagine if you're a surgeon and you're implanting an artificial hip or shoulder or some other joint in the body, an elbow, a knee. You think you want to follow somebody else's cookbook about how to do this? Think again. So the Hospital for Special Surgery somehow has worked with these famously independent, strong-minded people. Hey, if you're a surgeon, this is life or death, so you better be strong-minded. It's not, what do you think, what do you think? You better be very convinced that what you're doing is the right thing to do. So they've taken these people who don't even work for the hospital, and somehow they've convinced them and worked with them to develop protocols that they'll all follow. Following these protocols is very important because it enables more uniform delivery of healthcare, fewer mistakes, more practice in learning how to do the same thing over and over again. All of these things improve the quality of care and they lower the cost of care. But it's not only the doctors there who do something that most physicians do not do, and that is follow jointly developed care protocols. It's also the other key people who make the place run, like the nurses or the physical therapists who get somebody who's just been operated on, who's moaning and groaning. They get them out of bed and they start the painful process of getting them to walk. So first of all, the nurses and the physical therapists, they work in teams there. And we know that they work in teams not because they tell us they work in teams, but because they do things that people who work effectively in teams do. So, for example, they developed a new kind of person. They call them a mobility technician. And this is the person who helps you get out of bed after your surgery to start the very painful and difficult process of learning how to use your new joint, your new shoulder, your new hip, your new knee, your new wrist, your new ankle again. That person is partners, part physical therapist, and they've developed this new position. How they treat the nurses is really interesting. So the nurses have categories, and they know that they can advance within this great institution, the Hospital for Special Surgery. Plus, the nurse runs the floor. So in most hospitals, surgery is over there, and radiology is over here, and physical therapy is over there. In the Hospital for Special Surgery, everything is on every floor, and the nurse owns the floor. He or she is the CEO of that floor. That's fabulous for the nurses, greatly skilled people who are now given the authority that is commensurate with their skill to actually manage the operations of the place. And it's great for the physicians. They have somebody with whom they can interact who's responsible for everything on that floor to make sure that the many things they need to have happen correctly. So we have this great hospital, has phenomenal quality. It's relatively low cost. You can see that because it's pretty profitable. And it wants to expand what it does elsewhere. Wouldn't you want to do that if you're working someplace that does something really well? Wouldn't you want to bring that skill, that discipline, that culture to other places? And because the Hospital for Special Surgery is so articulate about what they do, in other words, they don't just wave their hands and say, we've got teamwork and we've got culture. No, they've got protocols. They measure how people work. They have very clearly defined accountability standards. They have very clear promotion standards. They even hire people with a very articulate, well-defined kind of way. So for them to go someplace else shouldn't be that hard. So when they went to the UK, which the case describes, did they do well? They greatly reduced the length of stay, which is abbreviated LOS. That's very important. Who the heck wants to stay in a hospital for 11 days? First of all, you don't want to be there. And secondly, hospitals, they're dangerous. You can catch some infection. Something can happen to you that's different from what you came in with. So you want to get out of there as quickly as possible. And when they went to the UK and they started a new Hospital for Special Surgery there, they greatly reduced the length of stay. When they reduced the length of stay and they practiced their fabulous protocols, costs went down and quality went up. So the infection rate, that's a really worrisome thing about hospitals, is you can get an infection. Hundreds of thousands of people get infected in hospitals, and some of those bugs, nobody knows how the heck to get rid of them. But the infection rate went down from 1% to 0.16%. So instead of 1 out of every 100 people getting infected, it became a sixth of that. Fabulous results. So HSS, great institution, very articulate about what it does. It's ready to go someplace else. It went to the UK, huge success. Now it wants to do it again. And the question is how? It's reminiscent of Kathy Hoffman's question in Vitalia. She wanted to grow. She could grow by franchising or by ownership. And these people have the same kind of question. How do they grow? But they have many more choices than Kathy did. And they have a constraint that we shouldn't forget about. that Kathy did not have, and that is their nonprofit. So Kathy, if you remember this case, the guy came to her and said, I'm going to give you 3 million euros if you do blah, 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 and you're going to give me a share of your company. In the case of the Hospital for Special Surgery, there are no shares to give away. There are no new owners who will give you a bunch of money to fund your expansion. They're nonprofit. So that's a constraint, but they have a lot of choices. So one of the choices is they could consult to other hospitals and help them be as good as the Hospital for Special Surgery is. Or they could start a hospital management business. This is a franchising business like Kathy, where they say, you know, for certain fees, we're going to help you manage your hospital. Different from consulting. Consulting, you get paid a fee for coming in, giving your advice, you leave. Hospital management, you have a recurring fee for helping to manage the hospital. Or they could start a chain of orthopedic hospitals. I don't know if you remember in the Battle of the Bulge, we looked at a chain of bariatric surgery centers. Why not have a chain of Hospital for Special Surgery? I think there'd be a lot of places all over the world that would love to have a hospital that is of the quality and of the cost structure as HSS. Other thing they could do is they could do ad hoc consulting. Somebody comes along, says, would you work with me? You like the story and you do it, but it's ad hoc, it's not strategic. This is what they did with the UK. Some more choices. They could do a joint venture with a hospital. So a joint venture is different from franchising. It is when a hospital comes along and says, we will jointly share in the profit and losses if you work with me. One last choice. So a companion to this case is a case about a global eye sight network. It's called SEVA. It's a fascinating organization. And the Hospital for Special Surgery could do a joint venture with SEVA. And part of SEVA is focused on blindness. So there are millions of people who are blind all over the world for no reason. Surgery could eliminate or correct their blindness. Corneal surgery, for example. So SEVA started a program with 100 hospitals all across the world. Africa, South America, Asia, Europe, everywhere. And it trained these hospitals in how to do eye surgery. And it had remarkable results. SEVA has a budget of $9 million. So for $9 million a year, it achieved these amazing results with 100 hospitals. And they did it with very well articulated steps about how to get a general hospital to adapt protocols that will help them do eye surgery very successfully. They're an amazing organization. And we have a tape with the woman, the wonderful woman who heads their eye care network. Urge you to look at that tape and learn about how they do what they do at such remarkably low expenditures. So the Hospital for Special Surgery, among its options, is to partner with SEVA. Or the last option is it could just say, none of these things work. I'm going to go with the status quo. So why don't you have a group discussion and think about which of these options to pursue. I think a good way to start with this is to do a 6-factor analysis of all the options. Talk about it as a group. Each of these options, are they well aligned or not with the 6 factors? And then let's come back and talk about it. So, what do you think is the best choice among all these choices? I'll tell you one that I eliminated right away. The one I eliminated, and I eliminated it because of the financing factor, is ad hoc consulting. So when they went to the UK, they got paid $350,000. $350,000 is a lot of money, but the work they did was worth tens of millions of dollars. So I don't think they are cut out for ad hoc consulting. If they're going to do consulting, they need to be much more strategic and well organized about how to do it. So we have left, if you agree with me, that consulting ad hoc is out. We have left as options, they could do a regular consulting business. They could do the franchising. They could start a chain of orthopedic hospitals. They could do joint ventures, like the one with Sarah Bloom that's described in the case, or they could do a joint venture with Seva, or they could say, the heck with it, we're going to stay with the status quo. So let's pursue this financing factor a little more on these options. And what about the consulting, hospital management, chain of hospitals, blah, blah, blah? How did they fare under the financing option? Well, to do a consulting business, you need consultants. They're not cheap, they're not working for minimum wage. So it's going to be costly to start up a consulting business, and the revenues are kind of uncertain. You don't know if you're going to succeed as a consultant. They could succeed because they're very articulate about what they do. They don't just come in and wave their hands. They know what they're doing. They know how to teach it. But it's a business where the revenues are not certain. Hospital management, in contrast, you still need a group of people who can do the franchising and who can teach the franchisees to do what the hospital for special surgery does. So it is costly. You need to create this group of people, but you've got more certain revenues because you've got to deal with a hospital, you have a franchise agreement, and you're going to have not only more certain revenues, but a stream of revenues. Consulting business is one of, you do the job, you're done. Hospital management, as long as the franchise is there, you can keep going. Chain of hospitals, what about that? Well, that's really costly. Now you're going to need billions of dollars to create a chain of hospitals, but the rewards are commensurate. Hospital for Special Surgery does very well. And if they had a chain of a hospital for special surgeries, the revenues are more than commensurate for the costs involved. Of course, the problem is, How does the Hospital for Special Surgery, a nonprofit organization, raise the billions of dollars that are required to build a chain of hospitals? So what about doing JVs with hospitals? That's kind of similar to the hospital management business, but it's more risk, more reward. If the deal does well, you get more reward. If the deal doesn't do so well, you take on more risk. How about working with SEVA, with this phenomenal organization? Well, that's not going to cost you that much. SEVA started 100 eye hospitals for $9 million a year, but you're not going to get any money as a result of that. So in terms of risk-reward, the consulting business seems to me to be dominated by the hospital management business. You have the same level of risk. In other words, you have to hire people who could do both. But in the hospital management business, you have a stream of revenues rather than one-of kind of revenues. I would drop the consulting business. Chain of hospitals, if they were for-profit, I think the Hospital for Special Surgery could do so well with their skill set. But they're nonprofit, so where is that money going to come from unless they're willing to convert to be for-profit and get the billions of dollars it would take to build hospitals for special surgery all over the place? That's not very viable. How about the JVs with hospitals? That's a little more risky than the hospital management business, but it's still something that would enable them to do what they want to do. Remember, what they want to do is grow. And the deal with SEVA, for sure, SEVA's been there, done that. It's gone from 0 eye hospitals to 100 eye hospitals very fast with very little money. So let's look at the other of these 6 factors and their impact on what we have left as choices. So we've eliminated the consulting business, and sadly, we've eliminated the chain of hospitals as options. We have left the hospital management business, the JVs with hospitals, and then the JV with SEVA. How do the other of the 6 factors other than financing affect them? I think the structure would be fine with any choice that the Hospital for Special Surgery made, except if it chooses to joint venture or do hospital management. The hospitals with whom it does not affiliate may be angry and may retaliate in some way against the hospital with whom they choose to work. How about public policy? Well, public policy understands that you need to build scale in healthcare delivery through integration of great ideas and great ventures like the Hospital for Special Surgery. So whatever they choose to do, hospital management, JVing with other hospitals, working with SEVA, they're okay with it. How about technology? This is a little more problematic. So the Hospital for Special Surgery, it is what I call a focused factory. So this term got introduced in production when people were looking at manufacturing in the United States. And a colleague of mine named Wickham Skinner, there's a real New England name for you. So Wickham Skinner wrote an article that said that these great big vertically and horizontally integrated firms, which were the heart of what created the Industrial Revolution, that they were dinosaurs. And what we needed to be agile and successful in manufacturing in the United States were focused factories that didn't do everything for everybody. They did one thing. They were very focused, and because they were so focused, they would do it very well. So when he wrote this article, people said, "You are as thick as a brick. You think that U.S. Steel and Bethlehem Steel are going to become focused factories? We dominate the world in steel production." Well, 40 years later, no, we do not. And the steel firms that are successful in the United States are very, very focused. And the reason they're successful is when you're focused, you know what you're doing much better than if you do a whole lot of things. And when you know what you're doing, you get better quality. And you also get lower costs. You make fewer mistakes. So I thought this was a great idea. And in a book that I published called Market-Driven Healthcare, I espoused the idea for healthcare. And I said, instead of doing everything for everybody, we should be focused, and we should be focused especially by diseases. I had about the same reaction as Wickham Skinner did with his espousal of focused factories, although the book was a bestseller. But the response was, this lady doesn't know what she's talking about. I published the book in 1997, and now I'm glad that I've lived long enough to see the idea of focus be widely adopted in public policy. It's called bundling. We need to bundle care so that we have integrated care for people, especially people who are sick, who have diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and so on. So Hospital for Special Surgery is a focused factory. All it does is surgery, or primarily what it does on joints. So that is key to its strength, I believe, that it is so focused. But can it really work with general hospitals that do everything for everybody? It's very different to run a hospital that focuses primarily on joint surgeries than to run a hospital that does AIDS and heart disease and heart transplantation. And by the way, we also do orthopedic surgery. I personally think it would be difficult. I put this under technology, but I think it would be difficult for the Hospital for Special Surgery to work with general hospitals, either as a joint venture or as a franchisor. SEVA, however, it has shown how it can work with general hospitals and convert them so that they become very good, in their case, with eye disease. How about the customers and these different choices? Customers love focused factories like the Hospital for Special Surgery. They treat them well. They're very effective. They get them in and out. They don't get infections. They teach them how to walk. No matter what they do, customers will like this. How about the last of these 6 factors, accountability? Well, again, if you're a focused factory and you do only one thing, you can measure your impact pretty readily. But if you're a general hospital and you're doing hundreds of thousands of different things, accountability is very difficult. So you see where I'm going here. The analysis of the 6 factors has convinced me maybe not you, has convinced me that the only route for the Hospital for Special Surgery is to joint venture with SEVA, or just to say the heck with it. Of course, if it were a for-profit firm with access to capital, obviously the thing it should do is build chains of hospitals all across the world, but it's not. It's a nonprofit, and it cannot do it. Are we done? No, we're not done. We need to understand the business model. Is Hospital for Special Surgery, in conjunction with SEVA, will it have a successful business model? So let's look at the elements. So what would this thing be? Hospital for Special Surgery with SEVA. Well, it's an integrator, right? It's going to provide high-quality care at lower cost. SEVA is a great integrator. We know that, so give it a check. Competitive strategy. What kind of strategy would they have? Well, it's got to be first mover. There aren't hospitals for special surgery all over the world. If it partnered with SEVA, it would be the first one to provide it. SEVA's great at doing that. It would be able to implement this strategy. Is it financially viable? Yeah. SEVA has done 100 eye hospitals for $9 million a year. Yeah, I think it's very financially viable. Will it be valuable? No. So if the Hospital for Special Surgery partners with SEVA, it's going to do a whole lot of good, but it's not going to reap the financial rewards of that. Is this whole thing sustainable? You know, is this just a one-note Johnny and they do the deal and then it falls apart? So what about the management? Is there compatibility between the management of HSS, the management of SEVA? I don't know, but they've worked with 100 hospitals, so probably yes. They would know how to work with the Hospital for Special Surgery. So the last thing we have is this a do good, do well venture? Do good? Absolutely. Do well? Sorry, no. All right, so we've gone through this case study. I hope you feel that the framework, the 6 factors, the business model, the idea of what kind of organization am I, has enabled you to kind of plow through this range of choices and reach a reasonable conclusion. So what did the Hospital for Special Surgery do? As of now, they did none of the above. It breaks my heart that this marvelous institution is not replicated all over the world, but they have decided to stick with the status quo. Here's something else that happened with the Hospital for Special Surgery. The CEO at the time, do you notice how little money they got paid for doing all this work? Well, he's now in jail, and he is in jail because he extracted kickbacks from his vendors. Quite a surprise. So, what is it that we can take away from this particular case? First, Very important. This framework helps you reach reasonable conclusions about how to innovate in healthcare. Second, being nonprofit is sometimes a terrible constraint. In this case, they just couldn't grow as much as, in my opinion, they should grow, although it's a truly noble organization. SEVA is nonprofit as well, and it's an extraordinarily mission-driven organization like the Hospital for Special Surgery. Third lesson, don't assume that people are angels. Even the very sophisticated board of the Hospital of Special Surgery, composed of major New York City finance wheelers and dealers, they found out to their dismay that their CEO was acting fraudulently. See you for our next case.